towering figure.
He's almost a tour de force.
He's a giant in the law.
Savvy, whip smart.
Extreme brain power, forceful advocacy, and no ego.
Brilliant, insightful, strategic, fun.
Adventurous and active.
One of the nicest, most down-to-earth people that I know.
And if I may add, joyful.
He started out of Yale Law School the way many of us did, as a young lawyer who wanted to be a litigator, a trial lawyer, an appellate lawyer. And he went to a firm, Miller Cassidy, which was small but highly well respected.
We tried cases. We did every kind of work that you could imagine. We took whatever came in the door. Seth specialized in trial work. He handled some of the hardest problems.
Was already identified as a star with all sorts of accomplishments.
But the real breakthrough was when he went into the Clinton administration and joined the Justice Department.
As an associate deputy attorney general, and then became the deputy solicitor general. He also was acting deputy attorney general when I left, and ultimately was nominated by President Clinton as Solicitor General of the United States, where he was one of the greats.
Seth Waxman was really remarkable Solicitor General. He had the academic pedigree, he had the legal chops, but he didn't treat it like a seminar room. He was a lawyer's lawyer and had one of the most successful records of anybody arguing before the court in the country's history.
As Solicitor General, the first ever to do so, Seth Waxman took an interest in patent cases and took the view that the Supreme Court should also take an interest, which they have increasingly in recent years.
After leaving that, he came here and founded what has become a great litigation department. And over his career, he's argued 75 cases in the Supreme Court and lots of other cases as well.
Look at a list of them, just one that comes to mind, eBay, Bowman versus Monsanto, I for I Microsoft, recently Apple versus Samsung, the Kettle cases, Akamai. There's just a long list where his participation has really made a difference in how the law is developed.
So he is the person who had the juvenile death penalty declared unconstitutional. He is the person that had the Supreme Court decide that exercise of peremptory challenges based upon race was unconstitutional. He was the person who had the Florida law on the imposition of the death penalty declared unconstitutional. He was the person who, on behalf of the Guantanamo detainees, had the court find their incarceration to be unconstitutional.
Seth Waxman has been one of the most thoughtful and powerful legal voices behind the idea that we have a constitution that can allow a working democracy, that can allow election integrity and free speech.
He's also the only lawyer I've ever seen make effective use of humor in an oral argument before the Supreme Court. Most lawyers who try to crack jokes crash and burn in front of the Supreme Court, but Seth has done it more than once in a way that ends up being very effective.
He's also so devoted to the public interest and to pro bono cases, it's hard to believe he can do all of his regular work and still do all this public service that he does.
You have to imagine that every Supreme Court argument is important. You have to imagine that after the argument, the clients want nothing more than to talk to him about how it went. But his routine, his custom, is after the argument's over to go out to lunch with his wife, Debbie, and nobody else. Family is the most important thing to him. There is nothing more important than his family.
He and Debbie have raised 3 terrific kids. The pride shines through whenever you get started talking about his children.
One example of how crazed Seth Waxman is about everything he does, including his family, is that when his daughter Sarah was the goalie on the women's lacrosse team at the University of Pennsylvania, Seth went to every game, wherever it might be. He would show up nearly every Monday with no voice from having shouted so vociferously from the sidelines.
They have a grandchild that they're so proud of. And every year Seth takes one of his kids on an exotic vacation. And when I say exotic, I mean really exotic. That's just part of his life.
He runs, he skis, He swims, he bikes, anything that gets himself outdoors.
He's a very serious runner. I've been to conferences where I'm sitting at a breakfast table with other speakers, and in comes Seth Waxman, huffing and puffing in running clothes.
Seth is an incredible Bruce Springsteen groupie. There was a concert that Springsteen was giving in Philadelphia, and a bunch of us, including Seth, rented a van. We rented a driver. Who else would be crazy enough to rent a van and a driver and go to Philadelphia to see Bruce Springsteen? But Seth.
One of the most important legacies that Seth will leave behind in intellectual property is the depth and the breadth of the cases that he had, and the success he had, and frankly, how he advanced the law in our world.
Seth Waxman came to the patent law as a stranger and became a master. And he's become an intellectual leader in the field.
When scholars look back at the law of democracy and the law of civil liberties in our tumultuous era, they'll be looking at arguments Seth made, cases Seth fought, and fights that weren't always won the first time around, but which are the right fights over the long term.
And that's made him quite arguably the most important intellectual property lawyer in America.